All right, welcome back from the break. Hello everyone, as Izzy said, my name is Monal Khocshi, and I lead the research and insights team at Dropbox, which is a cloud storage and collaboration company. So today I'm going to be speaking about how we as UX professionals can build our influence, which is key to our impact for our companies. All right, oops. I'm going to use this clicker. All right, so first, what exactly is impact? So impact is defined as the effect or influence of one person, thing, or action on another. And so we all want to affect product decision-making in our company and ultimately improve the lives of our users, the people using our products. So as UX professionals, producing high-quality craft is essential to these end goals. All right, so why does even our best work sometimes not get implemented? As designers, researchers, and writers, we often don't get a seat at the table in making these decisions because we are sometimes seen as just a service to other functions. However, we can change this perception. I believe that when it comes to our roles, 50% of our roles should be focused on producing high-quality craft. And the other half should be to influence others and drive decisions for the product and business. So it wasn't until later in my career that I really started to realize how important influence was. Initially, I focused on improving my craft as a designer and researcher to advance my career. And I constantly sought to learn new methodologies and gain experience around new tools. But as I gained those skills, I didn't always have the impact that I wanted. I would conduct research that wasn't used. I would design experiences that engineers didn't always implement. And I wondered why. And I started to notice other peers who were having more impact. And they weren't always more senior or better at craft than I was, but they knew how to win over the people making decisions. So in this talk, I'm going to discuss strategies for having influence, which will help us show up as strategic partners and also help us win those seats at the table. Generally speaking, there are many ways to influence. Sales folks employ many psychological tricks of the trade in order to help influence human behavior. And while that works, this talk is really about having influence with integrity. So not using sales techniques, but really with our partners and stakeholders, we're working towards a common goal. So most of the time, we just need to provide the right context around our craft in order to gain that buy-in. We just need to logically illustrate to decision makers how implementing our work will get them closer to our shared goal. So I believe that UX influence is centered on these three areas. First, knowing the business. Second, building trusting relationships. And third, perhaps most importantly, mastering communication. So I'm going to focus on these three areas for the rest of the talk. All right, so when it comes to knowing the business, I tell my team that what matters most is remembering what makes every business successful. And that's making money. So as UX professionals, we are the experts of our users and their needs. However, the needs of our users and the needs of our business aren't always the same. We need to put on our entrepreneurial hats and make sure that our work and our ideas are focused on the bottom line. So speaking the language of the business will really help us influence the decision makers of the business. And these skills become more and more important as you grow more senior in your role. So at Dropbox, I asked my team the following questions to help them build gain an understanding of the business. So first, questions around gaining an overall understanding of the business and the company strategy. So this includes knowing the company vision, how it makes money, and what the short-term and long-term priorities are and their goals. I also want to make sure that they're aware of the metrics that are most important to the business. Then there are questions that are more specific to their area of the business or their product that they're working on. This includes the product vision of the product, as well as the market size and opportunity, and of course, understanding who the target users are and their needs. And importantly, also knowing the general target metrics for their area that they want to try and move. So overall, it's important for my team to be able to answer those questions because it helps them know which projects will have the most impact for the business. You know, as researchers, folks who get research requests, there are always more than you can do. And so you need to be able to prioritize. And at the end of the day, I want my team to move boulders, not pebbles. All right, so the second key to UX influence is building trusting relationships. And you may ask why? Well, because building product is a team sport. So let's see a raise of hands. How many of you here have played on a team before? All right, now it looks like the majority of you. And so you then understand how important it is to really understand and know your teammates, be aligned on goals, and ultimately share ownership in your play. The same goes for building products. So because Dropbox is a product-focused company, I tell my team to become best friends with their product managers. Not only because the product team drives key decisions, but they also help us learn about the business and the metrics to focus on. I ask my team to use their researcher skills in order to get to know their cross-functional teammates, empathize with them, and understand their point of view. Really, to think about their partners as they do users, with the goal of helping them succeed in their goals. So having that mindset really helps us build more trusting relationships. Another way to build a stronger relationship is to bring partners and teammates along for the journey. So not doing so can risk your ability to influence, and it also increases the chances for misalignment. So I have an anecdote. At a past company, one of my team members received a research request from a product manager. And she immediately dove deep into that research and delivered her report about a month later. However, her work was not utilized, and it was because she had misinterpreted what the PM had wanted. So had she kept her product manager in the loop throughout her process, perhaps getting him to participate in research sessions or sending him updates about her learnings, she could have avoided going down the wrong path. Similarly, for designers, it's really important to lower your barriers, and I know this isn't easy, for sharing early work with your partners, because getting that feedback early and often is crucial for success. All right, so not only will engaging in these routines help you gain influence with your peers and partners, it will also help you build an army of advocates for your work. So with that said, who else outside of your immediate partners and stakeholders do you need to influence in order to have and drive larger decisions? All right, this is my colleague, Sandra Bilbrey. She is a director of design at Dropbox. And she says that she's needed to change who she influences over time. So she says, as a designer, I needed to influence engineers, the people making my vision real. Now as a director, I think about decision makers and managing up, less about the product itself and more about the environment. She asks her direct reports to create a relationship map. So this helps them list out the key people that they need to work with or influence. and doing so helps for team members understand where they have gaps in their relationship and where they need to improve that influence. It's also key to know what is important to each of those people in the relationship map. So, for example, I've seen UXers utilize the same presentation when presenting their work to audiences of various leadership levels, even though the presentation was relevant for just one of those audiences. So one leader I actually spoke with mentioned how at a past company, a CEO fell asleep during a research presentation as it was far too long and academic in nature. So obviously, here's that photo, I mean, not real, but that in that case, the presenter was not thinking about the needs of a C-level executive. And as a lot of you are aware, executives are typically focused on making quick decisions for the business at large and are very busy. So it's really important for us to speak to key points and to be able to get to the bottom line as quickly as possible. And then with peers or more technical partners, it might make more sense to go into more detail. All right, so this transitions nicely to my final key for UX influence, which is mastering communication. So as I just mentioned, it's important to cater your communication and storytelling to what will most interest your audience. So think about the last time you presented to your craft to leaders. What did you need to say or do to get their buy-in? I'll give you a second to think about that. Remember that. All right, so this is my boss. His name is Alistair Simpson. He is the VP of Design at Dropbox. And he's seen great design work go awry. He said, communication skills can make or break any design project that you're working on. I've seen designers with great work communicated terribly, and it hurts me. So for our work to have influence, what and how we communicate should build up our great UX work, not take away from it. All right, so presenting your work, especially to more senior leaders, is an effort all on its own. As I just mentioned, executives are short on time, and they really like for people to get straight to the point. I coach my team on keeping their message to executives clear and concise. And the more senior the leadership, the more time it's needed to prepare, as crafting the right message often takes more time, as you can see by this quote by Blaise Pascal, which I love. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. All right, so also, when sharing work with a larger group of executives, it's important to ensure there's no big surprises. And we had to learn this the hard way. So my team shares a monthly research update with our senior leadership team. And it contains executive level insights that we believe that they really need to be aware of. But we made a mistake with our very first update. It contained some hot off the presses marketing research, and our VP of marketing had not yet seen it. So when that marketing leader saw it along with the rest of the executive team, they were surprised. So obviously no one likes to be caught off guard, especially in front of their peers. And so we now make sure that we have buy-in from any affected leaders before we share these updates broadly. All right, so over the next few slides, I'm going to talk about gaining buy-in for our work when presenting. The key opportunity I've seen from my team and others is that we can provide more business context before jumping directly into our work itself. So for example, every week, our design VP and our directors hold a design review meeting in which different team members present their work for review. And because each leader in the room focuses on a different area of the business, we aren't always familiar with what's being presented. We don't have that context. So it's really important for team members to tie the work back to the business and its goals so that we have a common foundation for understanding the work. And the context becomes even more important when UXers are presenting to cross-functional stakeholders because they don't always understand the design or the craft of design. But this context isn't always provided. So the feedback I often give team members is to tell the story about how their work is relevant for the business and its success. And there are 4 main parts to telling this story. First is to start with a clear statement on what they're presenting and their goals for the presentation. This includes any asks from the audience, such as specific feedback, approvals, or a decision that needs to be made. For example, if you're working on the company's onboarding process, you may say something like, today, I'll be presenting a new design and user experience for onboarding to our product. My goal is to obtain your sign-off to begin implementation. Next, we want to set the overall business opportunity and context, providing an understanding around how your area fits into the larger company vision and strategy. So citing data around the business opportunity for improving revenue and other target metrics is valuable here. So for example, keeping with that same onboarding example, you might say something like, 25% of potential customers drop out of our onboarding funnel. That's a potential loss of $10 million a year. All right, and then we want to orient the audience around the customers that we're targeting in order to promote, empathy for them and more context. So continuing with that example, we might say something like, we are targeting our Frank persona, which is the company's primary customer that drives 70% of our revenue today. They tend to be retired males, age 65 and over, who live in suburban areas, and they tend to be less tech savvy. And then finally, get to the specific customer problem in order that you're solving for. So walking through a typical user scenario with the current UX will help ground the audience in that product experience and the issue itself. So as you walk through the current experience, you might say something like, the 25% of the onboarding that we see the drop-off from comes primarily from the payment page. So we conducted a survey which revealed that more than half of them were reluctant to provide their credit card information on the payment page. And in our follow-up interviews, we learned that their hesitation is due to a lack of both brand recognition of the product and password or security on the site. So overall, walking through these 4 points of context only need to take like a few minutes up front. All right, so once you communicate that context, you can solidify the customer problem in your stakeholders' minds by playing a video clip from user research that illustrates the user's pain with the product. So as you all know, seeing the issue firsthand and hearing directly from users themselves often creates a much greater emotive response from our stakeholders and makes the problem more memorable in their minds. So direct quotes from users are also helpful, but usually not as powerful. And so as a result of providing this context, you're going to have more confidence from your audience when you're presenting your solution. So this is the part you all know how to do, walking through your solutions. However, make sure in doing so in a logical fashion, illustrating how it solves for each of the UX issues that you had raised. And then ideally, you will have done some experimentation or user testing to validate your design. And if you are able to speak to those results positively with both quantitative and qualitative data, you will have built your case for gaining approval and moving the work forward. All right, another one of my colleagues, Colin Whitehead, who is the Senior Director of Design at Dropbox. He agrees that overall, providing more data to illustrate how design will benefit the business will help us be successful. So he says, design ideas are often dismissed because designers don't do the work to truly understand the business. Designers would be winning a lot more battles if they used objective data to validate why their design makes sense for the business. All right, so overall, taking the steps to know the business, build relationships, and master communication may seem like an obvious thing to do, but it's actually not done very often in practice. And perhaps that's because we are so passionate about our craft, and that's why we do what we do. But the business side isn't always what we get excited about. So if we want to see our work in the hands of our users, we have to remember that we are working as part of a business, and which, as we discussed, is focused on making money. So for us to reach our goal of seeing our work in our users' hands, we need to convince decision makers that we understand their business goals and illustrate how our craft will help them get there. And this kind of influence is authentic, right? It upholds our passion for our craft while still meeting stakeholder needs to solve for the business goals and ultimately the user. All right, so special bonus here. In addition to those 3 areas for driving influence, we as UX professionals also have some special superpowers for influence given our UX craft talent. So first, in order to influence decision makers, we need to know what motivates them. So you put on your UX research hat to be able to understand people. We can use that superpower to determine what each stakeholder needs to hear from us in order to influence them. As UX designers, we can create compelling visual communications. And that will really allow us, oh, I think my laptop died. Okay. Well, it's still up, so that's good. We can create some really compelling visual communications to be able to get our audience's attention. And this could be through infographics, or it could be, bringing mock-ups to life, or even a presentation that wows the audience. And finally, as UX writers, as I mentioned, mastering communication is a really big part of success for us. So creating compelling narratives to get our ideas across clearly and concisely will really benefit us. So whether you are a UX team of 1 or many, you can bring along all of these skills to ensure strong influence. Okay. All right, so I'm going to leave you with one final case study around influence from Dropbox. And it centers around the Insight Summit, which is an initiative that I began this year. All right, so to provide some feedback, or to provide some background, when I first joined Dropbox over 2 years ago, we had several insights teams across the company, which I'm sure many of you do in your companies, including UX research, market research, data science, competitive intelligence, and voice of the customer. And so I started a group called the Insights Council, and that was with leaders from each of these teams. And so my goal was to break down silos across these teams and really build trusting relationships, reduce the duplication of work, and to collaborate towards driving what I call a single voice of truth. And this would be a single voice of truth for the company. So after several months of driving this community and gaining buy-in, I introduced the Insight Summit initiative earlier this year. And my goal for that initiative is for us to come together to collectively produce a single report that would influence our executive team and shape our company strategy for 2023. All right, so going back to the 3 keys of influence, they were really what were crucial for success for the Insight Summit. First, To influence at the highest level, we all needed to be on the same page around knowing the business. So at our kickoff meeting, I had invited our head of strategy, who had just presented some new thinking about our company strategy to our board of directors. And that person got us aligned with the company's intended direction and our executives' mindsets. Second, building trusting relationships. Across the Insights teams, building those relationships was vital to the success of this initiative. And that's because this was a self-driven initiative, meaning no one was asking for it. So I had to rely on each one of the leaders to provide members of their team to participate in the summit, which wouldn't have happened if those relationships weren't built. So you don't get resources for free. And finally, we needed to be masterful in our communication, and this was really the storytelling in the report itself. So what we were able to do was present the perspective and tie it back to the intended company strategy and where we were going. We cited a lot of data, obviously, quantitative and qualitative, and we integrated emotive video clips and quotes from various research studies to really illustrate our points. And we spoke to the opportunity around business metrics that these changes would affect. So the great news is that after sharing the report with the executive team, the report went viral across the company. And the initiative ended up being a huge success, driving decisions around our company strategy that had not previously been considered. The key outcome from this initiative was the formation of a company objective for 2023, which would address the primary opportunity we identified and presented in the report. So it was very exciting. It was the first time that all the Insights teams had come together and produced something that was truly bringing a single voice of truth for the company. All right, so wrapping up here in summary, as UX professionals, we need to do more than just focus on our craft in order to have impact. We need to understand and speak the language of the business and position our work in a way that shows decision makers why our work will help drive the company to success, i.e., make money. Think of Bugs Bunny. To do so, we need to ensure that we know the business, build trusting relationships with partners and stakeholders, and master communication to influence decision makers. Overall, we can also use our craft superpowers to our advantage when communicating our message. And if we're able to do all of this well, and do so repeatedly, we are bound to see success, not only for ourselves, but for our companies, and also ultimately for our users. So I want to give a huge thank you to the following leaders who engaged in conversations with me around this talk. And of course, thank you all for listening.